been trying to fix yourself for years, and that's exactly why nothing's changed. Here's the truth nobody wants to hear. Every technique you've learned, every practice you've committed to, every moment spent working on yourself has been reinforcing the one belief that's keeping you stuck. The belief that something about you needs to be different before you can fully show up. This video reveals the invisible operating system running beneath all your self-improvement efforts. It's called preemptive inadequacy, and it's the background program that splits your attention, creates resistance, and makes every moment feel like preparation for a future when you'll finally be ready. You'll see how trying to close the gap is what creates the gap, why every technique fails eventually, and what actually shifts when you stop improving awareness and simply recognize yourself as awareness. This isn't another method. This is the recognition that ends the search.
You've landed on this because something deep within your entire nervous system is recognizing what's happening in this very moment. This isn't about thoughts or intellectual concepts, but about a bodily sense of knowing that reveals how you've been tackling change, personal growth, and inner transformation has been completely inverted from the start. And this backward method is precisely the reason why nothing has stuck for good. Despite all the different approaches you've experimented with, or how deeply you've grasped things mentally, what I'm going to share with you right now isn't just another system for improving yourself. This isn't a fresh manifestation technique or some consciousness shortcut. What this actually is goes so against everything you've been led to believe, so completely opposite to conventional wisdom, that most individuals reject it the instant they encounter it. Which is exactly the reason it delivers results for the small group who truly understand what's being communicated here. The reason this specific transformation stays concealed isn't because it's exclusive wisdom meant only for those who are spiritually elevated. It remains hidden because it completely undermines the whole system of searching, striving, and evolving that creates billions in revenue and keeps countless people endlessly pursuing the next major revelation. The instant you grasp what I'm going to show you, that whole framework falls apart. Not because you've risen above it or grown past it, but because you finally see through the basic misunderstanding that made it appear essential to begin with. In this moment, notice what's taking place in your physical body as you're absorbing these words. There's a slight tightness happening, right? A subtle underlying nervousness that's been present for so long, you've likely stopped registering it completely. That physical tension represents the energetic imprint of what I call the gap, which is the imagined space between your current self and the person you believe you must transform into. Every strategy for self-betterment you've ever explored has been an effort to eliminate that gap. And every single effort to eliminate it has actually expanded it, made it feel more substantial, given it greater reality. Here's the thing that nobody ever mentions to you. The gap isn't actually there. It's never been there. But the second you accept the gap's existence and attempt to close it, you actually create it. You turn it into something real through the very process of trying to overcome it. The mechanism that nobody grasps. Throughout the last 10 years, I've observed thousands upon thousands of individuals working with personal development, spiritual exploration, and consciousness practices. And I've discovered something really intriguing. The individuals who experience the most dramatic transformations are never the ones putting in the most intense effort to transform. They're not the most rigorous with discipline, the most filled with knowledge, or the most committed to their daily practices. The ones who genuinely shift are actually the individuals who accidentally discover something that isn't even labeled as a technique. They unintentionally stop performing something they had no idea they were performing. And within that cessation, the entire experience transforms, not slowly over time, but immediately. 3 years back, this happened to me in the most surprising circumstances. I had invested years diving into neuroscience, quantum physics, meditation practices, energy healing, gathering information, perfecting methods, attempting to comprehend the fundamental mechanics of transformation so completely that I could deliberately design my own breakthrough moment. Then one random afternoon while I was sitting in heavy traffic, absolutely nothing remarkable was taking place. I wasn't practicing meditation or doing visualization exercises or intentionally working on my inner world. I was simply sitting there, feeling mildly frustrated about running behind schedule. And then something happened that I can only characterize as a moment of recognition. I became aware that I had been moving through my whole existence with an underlying belief so basic, so all-encompassing, that I'd never even thought to question it. The belief went like this: something about my current state needs to change before I can completely exist in this present moment. Not just within particular domains like professional life or intimate connections or physical wellness. In every area, during every moment, there was a continuous background operation functioning that communicated, sure, this moment is unfolding right now, but you can't completely participate in it just yet because you're not entirely prepared. You need to become more aware, more emotionally whole, more spiritually developed, more something else first. This wasn't a conscious thought running through my mind. It was the perspective through which I was filtering everything in my experience. An invisible lens that transformed every moment into a rehearsal for some future moment when I'd finally be sufficient enough to completely appear. And during that moment stuck in traffic, that lens became perceivable. Not because I had finally developed enough consciousness to detect it, but because something transformed in a manner I still can't entirely comprehend. And abruptly, the lens wasn't invisible any longer. I could perceive it as a lens instead of as the nature of reality itself. The instant I perceived it, it vanished. Not through struggle, or systematic practice, or specialized technique. It just disappeared because the singular thing keeping it operational was my total incapability to recognize that it existed in the first place. What transpired during the subsequent days and weeks wasn't what you'd anticipate from spiritual wisdom. I didn't encounter feelings of bliss or enlightenment or universal oneness. I didn't feel more self-assured or competent or emotionally healed. What I went through was so unremarkable it felt almost underwhelming. I simply felt like my authentic self, but without the perpetual background feeling that something was fundamentally flawed. And that unremarkable transformation altered everything in my life. Choices that had felt torturous became straightforward. Intimate connections that had been tangled became uncomplicated. Creative obstacles that had continued for years vanished in a single night. Not because I had conquered them or risen beyond them, but because the system that was generating them was no longer functioning. If this is striking a chord with you and filling in something that's been missing, consider staying connected here. Hit subscribe and the bell icon next to it if your brain just went, "Damn, I needed to hear that." Not because it's something you're obligated to do, but because it genuinely feels right. This isn't simply a channel, it's a frequency we're tuning into together. If you sensed a shift or a nudge while watching, you're already aligned with this space. We're not just consuming content here, we're practicing completely new ways of existing. We're not just taking in information, we're generating new possibilities for ourselves. We're not just learning concepts, we're remembering what we've always known. I'm genuinely grateful you're here in this space. Let's continue growing and shifting together as a community. The hidden operating system running your life. Your consciousness operates on a system just like your computer or mobile device functions. And similar to those technological devices, the operating system remains invisible while it's running normally. You don't observe the programming code executing in the background layers. You simply engage with what displays on the screen and presume that's the complete picture. The operating system executing your lived experience has a fundamental function that nobody discusses because we're all so merged with it that we're incapable of observing it in operation. That function is what I call preemptive inadequacy. Preemptive inadequacy represents the automatic belief that you're not yet equipped for this present moment, this specific interaction, this particular opportunity, this actual life you're living. It executes continuously underneath your conscious recognition. creating a subtle state of readiness, watchfulness, and self-supervision. This differs completely from basic low self-worth or absence of confidence. You can experience significant confidence in particular domains while still executing this underlying program. You can possess elevated self-worth while the background operation keeps functioning, because preemptive inadequacy isn't concerned with how you assess yourself. It's concerned with the basic presumption that you require assessment in the first place. Here's the way it manifests in everyday existence. So subtle, you'll likely miss it unless you're deliberately searching for it. You're engaged in a conversation, and even while you're communicating, there's a tiny fraction of your attention observing how you're being perceived, verifying whether you're expressing the appropriate things, modifying your facial expressions or vocal tone according to the other individual's reactions. You're not completely inside the conversation because you're at the same time managing your presentation within the conversation. You're engaged in a project, and even while you're executing it, there's a background evaluation operating. Does this meet the standard? Am I approaching this correctly? Should I be handling this in a different manner? You're not completely absorbed with the actual work, because a portion of your focus is continuously judging whether you're sufficient for the task at hand. You're going through something genuinely beautiful. A gorgeous sunset, moving music, a tender, intimate moment. And even while you're going through it, there's a faint feeling that you're not going through it in the right way, not sufficiently present, not valuing it appropriately. You're not completely inside the experience because you're observing your experience of the experience itself. This is what preemptive inadequacy accomplishes. It generates a division in your focus where a part of you is continuously stepping back, assessing, observing, verifying to determine if you're being sufficient to whatever's unfolding in this moment. And here's the truly devastating aspect. This divided attention is what generates the exact inadequacy you're attempting to prevent. When you're only halfway present because a portion of your awareness is monitoring your level of presence, you unavoidably feel less skilled, less linked, less vibrant. Then you translate that reduced capacity as proof that you genuinely do require more work on yourself, need to be more aware, need to develop more, which strengthens the preemptive inadequacy cycle. In the comments section, share one word that represents the energy you're deciding to embody moving forward. Perhaps it's alignment, perhaps it's ease, perhaps it's power, perhaps it's something completely unique to you. Allow that word to be a small yet meaningful statement, a signal like a quantum seed you're planting not just in this digital space, but in the quantum field itself. The reason every technique eventually stops working, every self-betterment technique, spiritual discipline, or consciousness approach you've experimented with, has been an effort to handle the inadequacy that preemptive inadequacy generates. You experience less capability than you desire to possess, so you search for methods to become more capable. You experience disconnection, so you work on presence. You experience restriction, so you focus on expansion. And these approaches can create short-term results. Meditation generates a sense of calm. Visualization provides you with drive. Energy healing generates new openings. Positive affirmations transform your internal dialogue. The outcomes are genuine, but they're short-lived because they're all handling the symptom while keeping the foundational mechanism undisturbed. It's similar to increasing your vehicle's heater while keeping the window completely open. The heater functions properly. You do experience warmth, but the core issue stays in place. Even more problematic, participating with techniques actually strengthens preemptive inadequacy. Every single time you engage in something to better yourself, you're subtly validating the belief that you're not yet sufficient. The practice itself transforms into proof of the gap requiring closure. This explains why you can invest years or even decades focusing on yourself and continue feeling like you're not completely there yet. It's not because you haven't discovered the correct technique, or you haven't practiced with enough dedication, or you haven't grasped things with enough depth. It's because the whole undertaking of self-betterment is built around the presumption of inadequacy. And that presumption is what's generating the exact issue you're attempting to resolve. The spiritual world has a term for this. It's called the trap of seeking. But even that conceptual framework maintains the trap operational, because it makes it appear like seeking itself represents the issue you need to conquer. So then, you're seeking to cease seeking, which is simply another dimension of the identical mechanism operating. The actual shift that works. So what represents the shift that genuinely works? It's devastatingly straightforward and totally counterintuitive in nature. You cease attempting to close the gap, not because you've surrendered or embraced defeat, but because you finally recognize that the process of attempting to close the gap is what generates the gap from the beginning. This isn't acceptance in the spiritual meaning of learning to feel okay with present circumstances. This isn't surrender in the meaning of releasing your sense of control. This represents something more basic than that, recognizing that the fundamental premise itself is incorrect. You've never actually been inadequate, not because you've transformed into adequate through personal growth or emotional healing, but because adequacy and inadequacy are ideas that only create meaning within a system that demands you to be measured against some external standard, and that system is completely optional. It's something your consciousness learned to execute, not something inherent to being a living being. When preemptive inadequacy ceases executing, you don't abruptly become self-assured or capable or worthy of value. Those represent concepts that only exist in connection to their opposing concepts. What takes place is more straightforward and more unusual. You simply exist, performing whatever you're performing, without the background operation of self-judgment. This might sound underwhelming to you. It might even sound like absolutely nothing. And that's genuinely a signal you're beginning to understand it. Because if it sounds like an accomplishment or a state you must reach, you're still operating within the system of inadequacy that requires overcoming. Allow me to provide you with a specific example of what this appears like in practice. Before this transformation happened, if I was preparing to have a challenging conversation, there would be extensive preparation involved. Mentally going through what I'd express, predicting possible responses, controlling my nervousness about how it could unfold. Throughout the conversation, there'd be continuous monitoring happening. How am I being perceived? Are they comprehending me? Should I modify my strategy? Following the conversation, there'd be analysis. Did I manage that effectively? Could I have expressed something more appropriate? Following the shift, the preparation stage just doesn't happen. Not because I've developed more spontaneity, but because the fundamental premise that I require preparing myself to be sufficient for the conversation isn't executing anymore. Throughout the conversation, I'm simply there, responding to what's genuinely taking place, instead of controlling my presentation. Following it, there's no analysis because there's nothing requiring evaluation. The conversation isn't superior or inferior. I'm not more or less skilled. The external outcomes might be precisely the same, but the whole experience is fundamentally transformed because I'm completely participating with what's taking place, instead of halfway participating while at the same time assessing my participation. How this genuinely happens in your life. You cannot force this shift to take place through technique or systematic practice. That's essential to comprehend. Any effort to accomplish this state strengthens the system that requires dissolving. But you can generate conditions where the recognition becomes more probable. Not conditions that trigger the recognition, but conditions that eliminate some of the barriers that maintain it concealed. First step, you require becoming acquainted with how preemptive inadequacy functions in your particular experience, not to repair it or conquer it, but simply to recognize it when it's executing. Begin observing the moments when you're performing something, while at the same time judging whether you're performing it sufficiently well. Observe when you're inside an experience while also monitoring whether you're experiencing the experience in the right way. Observe when you're being your authentic self while also verifying whether you're being yourself sufficiently. Don't attempt to cease doing this. Don't criticize yourself for doing it. Simply cultivate the ability to recognize when it's taking place. This recognition itself starts to generate space surrounding the mechanism. Second step, Explore what takes place when you intentionally don't activate the monitoring function. Select situations with minimal stakes initially. Perhaps you're cleaning dishes, moving somewhere, or absorbing music. Observe the impulse to assess how present you are, how consciously you're participating, whether you're doing it correctly. And then, simply don't activate that impulse. Not through struggle or self-control, but through recognizing that activating it is completely optional. Observe what takes place when you just allow yourself to clean dishes, move, absorb sound, without the background operation of self-monitoring. You'll likely observe that the experience becomes more intense, more direct, more fulfilling, not because you're being more present or more conscious, but because your focus isn't divided between the experience and the assessment of the experience. Third step, begin challenging the basic premise. When you observe preemptive inadequacy executing, pose this question to yourself: what if there's absolutely nothing about me that requires being different for me to completely participate with this present moment? Don't attempt to accept this or turn it into truth. Simply maintain it as a sincere question and observe what takes place. Frequently, the instant you genuinely question the premise, you'll observe that the singular proof for your inadequacy is the sensation of inadequacy itself. And that sensation is being created by the operation of verifying for adequacy. It's totally circular in nature. You experience inadequacy, so you verify to determine if you're adequate. And the process of verifying creates the sensation of inadequacy, which validates that you require continuing to verify. The instant you perceive this circular pattern with clarity, something can transform, not because you've performed anything to repair it, but because the mechanism relies on staying invisible. Once you perceive how it functions, it starts to release its hold. What genuinely transforms in your experience? When preemptive inadequacy ceases being your standard operating system, the transformations aren't what spiritual wisdom typically guarantees. You don't go through continuous peace, or transcendent happiness, or cosmic awareness. You go through something significantly more ordinary and significantly more meaningful. You simply live your life. Choices become more straightforward because you're not attempting to create the correct choice from a position of feeling inadequate. You're simply responding to what's genuinely taking place, according to what creates sense in the present moment. Connections become more direct because you're not controlling how you're being perceived or monitoring whether you're being welcomed favorably. You're simply engaging with genuine people in genuine circumstances. Creative expression flows more organically because you're not assessing whether what's coming through is sufficient quality or unique enough or valuable enough. You're simply permitting what desires to express itself to do exactly that. Difficulties continue appearing, but they're encountered in a different way. Instead of, "This is taking place, and I'm not sufficient to manage it, so I require becoming more capable," it transforms into simply, "This is taking place, so I'll participate with it." The difficulty is still present. Your ability might be precisely the same, but the background feeling of fighting against your own inadequacy has disappeared. The most unexpected transformation is in your connection with time itself. When preemptive inadequacy is executing, you're continuously living somewhat in the future, readying for a moment when you'll ultimately be prepared to completely participate. Even while you're performing things, you're not entirely here because you're readying to be here at some later point. When that mechanism ceases, you uncover you've been here the whole time. Not in a spiritual meaning of being present or conscious, just genuinely here, performing whatever you're performing, without the space between the performing and the assessing of the performing. Make sure you share this video with your loved ones. Remember, you're not just sharing content, you're spreading a frequency of recognition and truth that could transform someone's entire relationship with themselves and their reality. The trap contained within the shift itself. Here's what makes this transformation so difficult to grasp. The instant you comprehend it mentally, your mind right away attempts to accomplish it. And that effort to accomplish it is simply preemptive inadequacy dressed in a different costume. You absorb information about this shift and think, understood. I require ceasing to attempt to close the gap. I require recognizing that I'm already sufficient. I require releasing self-judgment. And then you begin attempting to perform those things, which indicates you're functioning from the premise that you're not yet performing them sufficiently, which is precisely the mechanism that requires dissolving. This explains why transmission holds more significance than technique. This explains why something can transform when you're not even making an effort. The shift doesn't take place through your struggle to create it. It takes place when the circumstances arrange in a manner that permits you to perceive through the mechanism instead of from inside it. Occasionally, this takes place without intention. Occasionally, it surfaces through continuous investigation that ultimately exhausts itself completely. Occasionally, it happens through meeting someone who's already experienced the shift and recognizing something in their energy that directs you back to what's already genuine for you. But it never takes place through attempting to create it. That's the contradiction that maintains most individuals caught in endless seeking. They comprehend that attempting doesn't function, so they attempt to cease attempting, which continues to be attempting. The path through isn't discovered in technique or systematic practice or intellectual comprehension. It's discovered in the instant when you just observe what's already present underneath all the attempting and not attempting, underneath all the seeking and releasing. And that observation isn't something you perform. It's something that takes place when you cease performing everything else completely. The recognition that's available in this exact moment. Something is available in this precise moment that has zero connection to who you believe you are or who you believe you require becoming. It's not an experience you require accessing or a state you require accomplishing. It's more straightforward than that and more apparent. In this moment, there's awareness present. You're aware of these words appearing, aware of your breathing, aware of your physical body, aware of whatever thoughts are passing through your mind. That awareness isn't assessing whether it's aware sufficiently or conscious enough or present enough. It's simply aware. The awareness that's absorbing these words in this moment has never been inadequate. It's never required improvement. It's never been insufficient for this moment. It's been absolutely adequate for every single moment of your whole existence, because it's what permits moments to be experienced from the beginning. Every occurrence of experiencing inadequacy has been a thought or sensation appearing within awareness. Every impulse to better or develop or expand has appeared within the identical awareness. The awareness itself has never required any of those things. This recognition isn't the destination. It's not something you accomplish through practice or reach through comprehension. It's what's already present, what's continuously been present underneath every effort to arrive somewhere or transform into something. The quantum shift that nobody discusses is exactly this. Cease improving awareness and simply exist as awareness. Not as a practice or technique, but as a recognition of what you already represent before all the narratives about inadequacy. When you cease attempting to improve awareness and recognize yourself as awareness itself, everything becomes simpler. Not because you've risen above complexity, but because you're no longer adding unnecessary dimensions of self-assessment to whatever's taking place. You're already sufficient. Not because you've struggled hard enough or healed sufficiently or comprehended enough, but because adequacy and inadequacy are ideas that only relate to objects within awareness, not to awareness itself. And you're not an object being assessed. You're the awareness within which all assessments materialize. This recognition doesn't transform you into someone special or advanced or spiritually awakened. It doesn't resolve all your difficulties or remove all obstacles. It simply eliminates the artificial difficulty that was generated by the assumption that you weren't yet adequate to be completely here. And when that artificial difficulty vanishes, what stays is just life taking place through you as you without the perpetual background interference of self-monitoring and self-assessment. That represents the shift. That's what genuinely functions. Not because it provides you with something additional, but because it uncovers what's been present the whole time, concealed underneath the seeking that never required happening from the beginning. In the comments section, share one thing you genuinely desire to manifest, and that's most significant for you in this moment. Perhaps it's financial abundance. Perhaps it's a fulfilling relationship. Perhaps it's a healthy and fit physical body. Perhaps it's something completely unique to your journey. Allow this to be a small yet meaningful statement, a signal to the universe you transmit not just in this digital space, but in the quantum field itself. Record 3 words in the comments if this recognition is connecting for you. I am awareness, not as a positive statement or a discipline, but as a straightforward acknowledgement of what's already genuine. And perhaps that represents the final contradiction of the whole search for transformation. It concludes, not with dramatic displays, but with the peaceful recognition that there was never a person searching to begin with. The whole journey of seeking, from the initial moment you sensed something was absent, to the numerous nights invested attempting to repair what you believed was damaged, was the activity of awareness, witnessing itself through restriction. Every technique, every setback, every realization was part of the identical movement. The action of consciousness acting as if it were incomplete, so it could rediscover its own completeness. You were never running behind on the timeline. Every seeming detour was actually the path itself. Every contradiction was actually a hint. Even the endless self-betterment cycles that drained you were essential illusions, temporary scaffolding that ultimately breaks down when the foundation underneath it is finally perceived. Because once awareness recognizes itself clearly, the narrative of becoming sufficient releases all significance. There's nothing remaining to pursue, and consequently nothing remaining to delay. From that moment forward, life keeps going, but it flows in a different way. Not more smoothly or more easily, just with more clarity. Actions take place without the interference of self-monitoring. Decisions surface without the background interference of fear. Feelings pass through like atmospheric patterns, materializing, passing, vanishing, without the mind transforming them into statements about your identity. What remains is straightforwardness. What remains is directness. What remains is life unfiltered by the act of attempting to be someone, experiencing it in the correct manner. And within that straightforwardness, genuine compassion appears not as moral excellence, but as recognition. You begin perceiving that everyone is trapped in the identical invisible cycle, confusing the sensation of incompleteness for evidence of being incomplete. You cease criticizing them because you comprehend the structure of their suffering. You've traveled every passage of that labyrinth personally. This isn't spiritual superiority over others. It's regular empathy, arising from perceiving how the illusion functions. Gradually, even the concept of awareness itself becomes softer. You cease dividing you as awareness from life, as experience. The separation breaks down, and what stays is participation, pure and immediate. Breathing, moving, generating, resting. No observer present, no observed present. Simply the perpetual, effortless emergence of what has continuously been taking place. And if words like enlightenment or awakening continue emerging, they're simply linguistic remnants, labels directing to something that never demanded a label from the beginning. Because the truth is more peaceful than all the wisdom, more straightforward than all the systems. It doesn't make announcements. It doesn't require to. It's the quietness you've detected in the spaces between thoughts since you were young, the identical quietness absorbing these words in this moment. So allow the pursuit to conclude here, not as giving up, but as genuine relief. Allow the following breath to take place without adjustment, the following thought to pass without examination. Allow reality to be precisely as it exists, without presuming you should be encountering it any more effectively than you already are. Because this precise ordinariness, this unmodified moment, is what every approach was quietly directing to the whole time. Nothing requiring repair, nothing requiring reaching, nothing absent from this moment. Like if you sensed something shift, share this gift with one person who genuinely needs it, and comment what connected most deeply for you, and hit subscribe, because you're prepared for what comes next. This is simply the beginning of remembering who you've always been.